What if the war in Ukraine crosses the unthinkable line? What if Russia, frustrated, cornered, and out of options, launches a tactical nuclear strike? Would it end the war or ignite something far worse? From the terrifying first strike to NATO's chilling retaliation, and how global powers could spiral into full-scale nuclear war. Welcome to Doomsday Broadcast. Today, we explore the darkest paths history could take. This is what happens when the first nuke falls, and the countdown of World War III begins. The war doesn't begin with a decisive victory, but with a grinding stalemate. For months, the front lines in eastern Ukraine freeze in place. Neither side can gain ground as trenches harden and artillery fire echoes across devastated fields. Ukrainian forces hold their lines while Russian troops dig in, their advances stalled by fierce resistance and tough terrain. Yet, the war's battles aren't just fought by boots on the ground. Ukrainian drones increasingly slip past Russian defenses, silent, relentless. These unmanned eyes in the sky strike deep behind enemy lines. Fuel depots in Kursk, a vital logistics hub for Russia, suddenly erupt in flames. Radar stations in Belgorod vanish in plumes of smoke. Even Moscow, far from the front, can hear the distant thunder of explosions shaking its outskirts. The message is clear: Ukraine is striking back, and harder than ever before. Meanwhile, inside the Kremlin, tension mounts. President Putin's grip on power begins to slip. Sanctions from the West squeeze the Russian economy, inflation soars, and unrest brews among the population. Protests, small but persistent, erupt in cities across Russia, signaling growing dissatisfaction. At the same time, the West keeps pouring weapons into Ukraine. Advanced missile systems, drones, and armored vehicles bolster Ukrainian defenses, slowing Russia's war machine to a crawl. As the stalemate drags on, Russia's options dwindle. Conventional tactics have failed to break the deadlock. The war's toll mounts, both in resources and morale. Then, in a shadowed war room, the unthinkable decision is made. When all else fails, a red button is pressed. At dawn, the world watches in disbelief as Russia fires its first tactical nuclear weapon of the conflict. From the occupied region of Luhansk, an Iskander-M missile launches, armed with a low-yield nuclear warhead estimated around 2 kilotons, designed for battlefield use rather than mass destruction. The missile's target, a large Ukrainian staging base near Dnipro. Moments later, a blinding flash lights the sky, followed by a devastating blast wave that levels everything within a wide radius. The explosion exterminates approximately 8,000 Ukrainian troops instantly and leaves behind a deep, scorched crater, a stark symbol of nuclear warfare's destructive power. In the hours that follow, radiation detection stations register elevated levels of fallout, and satellite imagery reveals the true scale of the devastation. Ukrainian survivors, some in hazmat suits, begin to evacuate the area, while the Kremlin calls the strike a signal, a brutal warning meant to force Ukraine and its allies to reconsider their resistance. For the West, however, this crossing of the nuclear threshold is a moment of grave alarm. The use of nuclear weapons anywhere in Europe changes everything. The red line has been shattered. The international response is swift and grave. NATO convenes an emergency meeting at its headquarters in Brussels. Article 4 is triggered, consultations that open the door to collective defense discussions. The alliance faces a stark choice: escalate or risk losing control of the situation entirely. Within hours, tensions explode again. A second nuclear strike rains down, but this time, the target is no longer a military base. The target is Kyiv, Ukraine's capital, once a vibrant city now reduced to a nuclear wasteland. Flames engulf the skyline, fallout blankets the surrounding regions. Panic spreads as civilians flee in mass evacuations. The red line has been shattered. In response, NATO launches a series of precise, non-nuclear airstrikes against Russian military assets. Missile strikes hit key bases in Crimea, Kaliningrad, and the Black Sea Fleet, targeting command centers, supply depots, and radar installations. Jets roar across contested skies as dogfights break out, and naval forces launch missile barrages from the Mediterranean Sea. But Moscow does not see this as mere retaliation. It views NATO's actions as a declaration of war. The fragile balance of deterrence has been broken. With both sides now openly engaged in nuclear exchanges and conventional combat, the world teeters on the brink of an unimaginable global conflict. As the nuclear taboo shatters, the global order begins to unravel. Strategic alliances harden, old rivalries reignite. In an unprecedented shift, China breaks its silence. Condemning NATO's strikes on Russian soil as Western aggression, Beijing openly arms Russia, sending drones, munitions, and advanced electronic warfare systems across the border. Then Asia erupts. North Korea bombards South Korean border towns with artillery. Seoul retaliates. The peninsula teeters on full-scale war. Further south, China takes bolder action. Carrier groups move toward Taiwan. Then, under a barrage of missile strikes, China launches an amphibious invasion. Cyber attacks cripple Taiwanese power grids as PLA Marines storm southern beaches. U.S. forces scramble from Guam and Okinawa, but they're stretched thin. Even the Philippines isn't spared. Chinese missile boats clash with Filipino naval patrols in the South China Sea, igniting another front in the Pacific. Meanwhile, in the Middle East, Iran sees its opportunity. It fires ballistic missiles toward Tel Aviv, targeting Israeli radar and command centers. Simultaneously, Hezbollah unleashes rockets from Lebanon. Israeli jets respond with force, flattening targets in Beirut and beyond. To the south, Houthi rebels strike oil tankers in the Red Sea, disrupting global shipping lanes. And in Syria, airfields open to Russian bombers headed for the Mediterranean. Across the region, American military bases, from Bahrain to Al Udeid, are attacked by Iranian proxy militias and precision drones. Within days, 1/3 of the planet is at war, directly or by alliance. And as the fires spread, one question looms. What happens when the next nuclear launch isn't tactical, but strategic? With conventional forces overstretched and losses mounting, nuclear weapons re-enter the battlefield, this time not as a threat, but as an operational tool. NATO, having exhausted high-level conventional deterrence, authorizes limited tactical nuclear strikes on Russian launch and command zones. Using low-yield warheads delivered from Ohio-class submarines, the targets are clear: silos and missile systems in Kaliningrad. The goal is containment, not escalation. But Moscow sees it differently. Within hours, Russia retaliates by targeting Rzeszów, Poland, a critical NATO logistics and supply hub supporting operations in Ukraine. A 10-kiloton airburst obliterates the base and surrounding civilian areas. Fallout maps show contamination spreading into Slovakia and Hungary. The West responds instantly. The U.S. escalates to DEFCON 1, the highest military readiness level. Submarines in the Atlantic and Pacific surface to signal deterrence. B-2, Spirit bombers armed with strategic nuclear payloads lift off under maximum alert protocols. NATO activates its nuclear sharing arrangements, with warheads distributed to bases in Germany, Italy, and the Netherlands. The world now stands seconds from total nuclear exchange. And amid this razor's edge, a second catastrophe brews, not on the battlefield, but across global society. The war may still be regional, but the collapse is global. Massive radiation plumes drift across Eastern Europe, carried by jet streams. Emergency sirens wail in Lviv, Budapest, and Chisinau. Entire regions evacuate. But there's nowhere safe to run. Turkey closes its borders. Romania declares martial law. Over 12 million people flee on foot, by car, by any means they can. Meanwhile, global markets nosedive. Crude oil hits $417 a barrel as tankers are rerouted or seized. The SWIFT banking network fractures amid mutual sanctions. Currencies collapse. First the ruble, then the Turkish lira, and then emerging economies from Brazil to Pakistan. Stock markets in London, Tokyo, Frankfurt, and New York shut down after limit-down crashes. Bitcoin briefly spikes past $1 million before crashing as internet blackouts spread. Urban life disintegrates. Paris descends into riots after supermarket shelves empty. In Berlin, power cuts leave hospitals on backup generators. In New York, mobs overrun a National Guard food convoy in Brooklyn. And amid the void of collapsing security, terror cells activate. Coordinated bombings strike Los Angeles, Madrid, Brussels. No warning, no suspects, only smoke. This is no longer geopolitics. It's the unraveling of civilization itself. And the question no one wants to ask is what comes after that. As the world burns, the last red lines are drawn. Russia issues a final ultimatum. Any NATO incursion beyond the Ural Mountains will trigger a full-scale ICBM launch. Submarines carrying Sinova missiles slip into Arctic waters, silent and primed. In the Pacific, China prepares a nuclear demonstration, a high-altitude airburst detonation over open ocean. A signal, not a strike. But the radiation spike is still picked up by satellites worldwide. The United States, already at DEFCON 1, scrambles Minuteman missiles to launch-ready status. In underground bunkers, the nuclear football is opened, one order away from irreversible action. Around the globe, sirens wail. NORAD lights up with heat signatures from mobile launchers. India and Pakistan issue mutual alerts. France and the UK prepare their own deterrents. Then, at 11:17 UTC, a system glitch triggers a false launch warning in Moscow. For 90 full seconds, the world teeters on the edge of annihilation. A single confirmation holds back global extinction, but it's too late to stop everything. Multiple launch sites activate. Submarine-launched ballistic missiles arc through the night sky. And then, a flash, brighter than the sun. Communications fail, satellites go dark, cities vanish. What's left may not recognize itself. In the end, there are no victors, only survivors and silence. This is no science fiction, it's a chain reaction, backed by real launch codes, actual payloads, and fragile command systems. A single tactical nuke, perhaps just 2 kilotons, can ignite a cascade that ends with multi-megaton devastation. This isn't the death of nations, it's the death of civilization. What would you do if this became real? Share your thoughts below. Subscribe to Doomsday Broadcast, because sometimes imagining the end is the only way to stop it.